Special welcome to today's podcast. I am excited to be in conversation with Kate. Kate is from the insurance industry, and today we're just going to be holding a conversation around automations and digitization. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. It's great to be here and chatting to you.
So can we just start our conversation by a way of introduction? Please tell us a little bit about who you are and the career journey that you have walked. And we would also love to know what your current job involves.
Sure. So yes, I've had a very long and varied history of occupation. So many years ago, last century, I started out selling photocopiers door to door, which taught me a lot about dealing with people and sales techniques. I'm no salesperson, but yes, I was. That's what I started out in. I then moved into the emergency medical environment, where I was involved in dispatching helicopters and emergency aircraft to pick up injured and ill patients across the world. That had an insurance connection to it. Where that benefit was insured, often through the banks. And I then started in travel insurance back in 2001. I set up the first travel insurance call center. We developed a system from scratch to be able to capture insurance sales on a platform and a call center. Then I moved through that for a number of years in short-term travel insurance until the first digital life insurer was about to launch in 2005. And I joined that company in the operations role, so general manager in operations, to ensure the proper running and proper automation of all the processes that go along with running in a life insurance company. So yes, I was there for 9 years, and we grew that business. We digitized and automated that business from nothing to one of the largest digital insurers in South Africa, direct call center and outbound call center and inbound call center space. We were very successful. We managed to bring life insurance to a lot more people that weren't able to access it before. Previously, people were only able to access life insurance through brokers. And obviously the lower end earners never had a broker and were never able to access this. So we allowed that to occur, and it was very successful. I was there for 9 years, and then I was offered an opportunity in Kenya, where they had historically their short-term insurance, so motor vehicle insurance, which was compulsory in Kenya, still is compulsory in Kenya, was purchased the way in South Africa we go to the Department of Home Affairs. So you go to an office and you queue all day, and you go from box to box until you finally get given your insurance certificate, which you can stick on your car, and that lasts a year. So people would have to take an entire day off just to go and secure their insurance in Kenya. So we digitized that process. We created a call center, and we started selling these policies telephonically. So it was a first in Kenya. It was quite successful. And I was there for a year. I set that business up and then handed that business over to the local management to run with that further. And then returned to South Africa and set up another direct life insurance business. I was there for about 18 months and set it up from the ground to fully operational, managed it for a couple of months until I knew that it was up and running. Then I left there to start my own consulting business. That consulting was into a large reinsurer in South Africa who had an automated, or still has an automated underwriting platform, which assesses risk. Historically, that process was done through underwriters, where you would receive your medical questionnaire, which was completed on a piece of paper. An underwriter would read it. They would apply their minds to it and come up with the correct premium. So this reinsurer had automated that process entirely, so no humans were involved. And they needed me to assist them with operationalizing this across a number of their clients. So I've been busy with that now for almost 5 years, assisting them with that on a part-time consulting basis. In the interim, I also started my own business, which was assisting in providing information that the underwriters require in a digital format for them to be able to absorb into platforms and automatically make decisions without having to ask clients too many medical questions. So that's up and running and is in use at the moment with a few insurers across South Africa. Then I was approached by a very small life insurer who had an operational requirement. However, they were not able to afford a full-time operational officer, a COO. So I then stepped in as a fractional COO. So for I've got a limited contract period, I am going to assist them with providing the services of a chief operating officer for 3 days a week. So yes, it's pretty varied. I have 3 jobs at the moment. So as they say, there's 24 hours in the day and then there's the night. So that's where I spend my time working in the insurance industry.
Beautiful, beautiful. What an exciting career you've had. You are the guru of the insurance industry. You've been in this industry for a long time.
So I'd say I'm pretty knowledgeable on the direct life insurance and the automated side of life insurance. I've never worked in a traditional insurance space, so I can't comment really on that apart from what I've picked up in over time. But yes, I do know my way around an automated insurance industry.
Awesome, awesome. So with that, then let's get into the automation conversation. Let's look at the underwriting automation. Let's start by defining what underwriting automation is, and probably talk about the digitization as well, because the two kind of go hand in hand.
Sure. So if I can define underwriting first, because that'll give everyone an understanding of what I'm talking about. So in life insurance, we issue policies based on a person's health, their age, their gender, their smoker status. There's a number of variables that we use, and we apportion a portion of the premium is risk premium, which relates to a person's health. So, for example, a person with a cardiac disorder or a heart problem will pay a higher premium than a person who does of the same age and gender who doesn't have a cardiac problem. And that needs to be assessed. So we have a multitude of heart problems that a person could have, and we need to understand what those are and how they might affect the person's longevity. So it sounds macabre, but we need to understand when a person's going to die, and then we need to apportion premium correctly to that. So insurers, nice, healthy young people get low premiums. 25-year-old will get a much lower premium. A healthy 25-year-old versus a healthy 45-year-old. 25-year-old will get a much better premium than the 45-year-old because they have less time to live. It's quite depressing, but that's the reality of life insurance. So underwriting is assessing the risk of that person. A smoker pays a much higher premium than a non-smoker because their chance of getting smoking-related diseases is much higher, and that's what underwriters do. So historically, your broker contacts you, you want life insurance, yes, they send you an application form which you fill out, mostly handwritten. That goes back to the broker. The broker then sends that on to a person, an underwriter. The underwriter then has a look through all the information, maybe asks a few more questions, goes back to the broker, back to the client. Those questions are answered. The underwriter then says, please go to the doctor. Let's do blood tests. I need an HIV test. I need a cholesterol test. I need a blood glucose test. They wait for those results. Those results are then sent back through to the underwriter who assesses them and then applies what we call a loading to the premium. Just say, we're going to load you an extra percentage on your premium because you have X, Y, and Z condition, and that is going to affect your longevity. So that's the traditional underwriting process, and we've seen that last up to 3 months. So from the client taking or applying for the policy to the policy being issued can take up to 3 months with all the backwards and forwards and waiting for medical results and application forms from the client, passing on to the broker, onto the underwriter, back to the broker, back to the client, and backwards and forwards. So a very clunky process, which really hadn't changed that much since for probably in 100 years. That's the way it's been done. It's always been done that way. And at the end of that process, that policy would then be captured onto a policy management system. So that's the digitization. So historically, in the old days, we used to have files with all the policies in that were stored somewhere in a cupboard. And you could go and look up the person's policy. That was digitized and moved to these platforms, these old platforms, and they exist, and they have existed for 30, 40 years with all these digitized policies on them. However, it's old technology, and it's now become we are unable to upgrade that any longer, and that's where the large insurers face problems. They have digitized, they have digital records of policies, but there's not much they can do with that. So new technology needs to be layered on top of that in order for it to be made accessible in the modern world. And that causes problems because you then need developers from 40 years ago to talk to current developers, and those attitudes are centuries apart, literally. So it becomes a problem for the large insurers. I know they would really like to move over to modern platforms, but it's a process and it's expensive. And when you've got a history of millions of policies on your books, you need to now move it to a new platform. It's costly and it's risky. So they struggle with that. So that's digitization, and that's about as digitized as the traditional insurers are. Then we have the host of new life insurance startups who were lucky enough to start in a time where the technology was new and exciting, and they've started building on modern technology, which allows them to be a lot more agile. It allows them to make changes really quickly, and it allows them to automate. Hence now underwriting then moved to an automation process. So instead of filling out lengthy forms in pen, the client is either through a call center or online now able to answer the questionnaire directly. It automates, depending on the answer that the client supplies to, let's say, 10 initial questions. It then automates the what we call reflexive questions. So you say, do you have a cardiac condition? Yes. Then it'll ask you again, well, from this list, tell us which of these conditions you have. Let's say we select that the person had a stent. Then it'll ask you, when last did you have a stent? Have you seen a doctor in the last 6 months? What treatment are you on? So then, and depending on each answer, it automates then a tree of additional questions that get presented to the customer. And that process can take anything from around 8 minutes to 45 minutes if a person's got a lot of conditions, which is a big departure from 3 months. So what happened there is we developed an efficiency process through automation, which allowed for a lot more sales to be made a lot faster and a lot more efficiently and much more cost effectively.
Fantastic. It's actually fascinating to see how automation saves so much time and gives a better customer experience, right?
Absolutely. And accessibility to clients. That's one of the biggest things. So when we launched initially in 2005, we saw people who had never considered life insurance at all, didn't know it existed. So there was marketing via a bunch of media, and people started seeing, well, here's something that's different to what I've known. And in South Africa, we knew funeral insurance well, but a lot of the population had not yet seen life insurance and didn't even know that it was applicable to them. So that allowed for a large portion of the previously uninsured to access insurance and easily and quickly without any hassles.
Let's look at the automation systems that are currently being used in the underwriting space in the insurance industry?
So it's a fairly new programs that are being used, and they are specifically being created by the reinsurers in order to service their book. So a reinsurer in this case would be an insurance company that sits behind a normal insurer that shares some of the risk. So you've got an insurance company that faces the client, but they don't want to carry the entire 100% risk of claims. So they then pass some of the risk and some of the premium onto the reinsurer. So the reinsurer then takes care of the underwriting rules, and they then develop these automation systems. There are a number of them across the world through all of the large reinsurers. Some are aimed at traditional insurers, and some are more aimed at the newer insurers, and they vary in their abilities to actually provide value to insurers. It all depends on the business model that the insurer is using and how much they want to automate or not. So yes, there are a number of them. I work with one in particular, which I'm not going to name now because that's kind of confidential company information. But to say, I'd like to say that it's the best automation system that exists in the world at the moment, based on my experience of actual use and implementation.
Great. So why do you think the insurance industry has really lagged behind in terms of embracing the new technology and automating their processes? What's going on there?
So insurers have been operating for a few hundred years, and their underwriting that they've been applying and their assessment of the risk they've fine-tuned it a lot. So they've really got down to understanding how to apply the underwriting, how to apportion risk and still maintain profit. So now we start adding automation in, where we start saying to these insurers who are really comfortable with their processes, we now have automation and we have a system that's going to make decisions that your underwriters would have made. The system's going to make those decisions. And they're nervous of that because they let's say they issue 1,000 policies and there's some error that has crept in on automation or a rule that they're not comfortable with, and that rolls out and they sell 1,000 policies. And they haven't accounted for that specific rule being in place. That could affect claims and it could affect profit over time. And it's a risk that could span 20, 30 years, and they could only start finding out about it much later in the history of the policy. And that's what they're nervous about. So they know their business and they know how it's been working for the last 100 years, and that's what they're comfortable with. And it's a departure to move from being traditional and application-based to an automation process. For new entrants into the market, it's a bit different, as they have to rely on the reassurer saying, yes, this process works and the automation works, and you can apply it to your business really easily and quickly. And the reinsurer is prepared to stand behind those decisions and maintain those.
So it's a very interesting dichotomy that's happening there in the industry, where the startups seem to be running with automations, whereas the big guys are quite complacent, obviously because of all these factors that surround them moving on to automation. So then,
Sure.
Do you think this poses a business risk for bigger companies that are so complacent, that are so behind with embracing automation? As these new ones come up and start taking market share, because obviously, they're bringing more efficiency, they're using automations for better customer experience. What would be your thoughts around that?
So I'm not sure the word is complacency, Sarah. It's each of these insurers, these large insurers, they've looked at automation, but it's difficult for them with the legacy systems to suddenly move everything over to automation. So what they start doing is they start opening divisions of the business, which start focusing on automation kind of test the water and see if they can also compete in the space that these startups are competing in. The benefit they have is these large insurers have recognizable names and have been around for over 50 years, a lot of them. And people understand them and recognize them and trust those brands. So when they move into that digital space, they see success. But it's not the entire book that moves over, because that's going to take a lot of work for that to happen. So I think there's an understanding that this will have to happen. It's just how it happens and how they migrate from a process that they've been running for so long to something that's more agile and easier to deal with. And there's people that have been working in those insurance companies for 40 years, and to change the mindset of people that have built and done the same thing for 40 years takes some doing. And they know that it works, and that's the way they've been working, and they trust their process. And now we come along and say, here's automation, and it's going to change everything. And it's understandable that they're looking at us and saying, oh, yeah, these new age people are trying to do something that's never going to work. And we know that technology is marching on, and we need to keep up with that. So yes, they're comfortable, they're working, it's operating. They're starting to dip their toes in the automation waters, and at some stage it will change. It will absolutely change. But maybe some startups have risen in the meantime to compete with them on a head-on-head basis, because they've been given the opportunity to do so.
So you've been in the industry for quite a long time, and I'm sure you've seen different trends come and go.
Yes.
In this case, what would be your advice? How do then the big insurance companies start, this journey of just becoming more agile? Yes, there is the issue of legacy systems that they have to deal with, but like you're saying, technology is marching on. So where do they start? What things do they need to just bear in mind or implement so that they can start marching on as well as technology is marching on?
So they have started already, and a lot of these companies have started their own direct and automated divisions to see how it works and understand what they can do to make this happen. So it's started, but insurance, because the nature of insurance and risk and premium over time, results in really slow movement to adopt new systems. So yes, it started, but a lot of convincing is still required, and a lot of running proof of concepts is still required in order for them to become comfortable and to understand how to start migrating business from old legacy systems to new processes.
Let's look at how automations affect the applicants or new applicants, automation and digitization. What has been your observation? How does automation and digitization affect the new applicants?
So if we had to take the 3-month example, where a policy could traditionally take up to 3 months, I mean, that's an extreme case, but let's say a month. We used to lose a lot of customers in that journey. So you apply for a policy, and it's a backwards and forwards, and it's a lot of dealing with your broker. And in this day and age, we don't really have time for that. We don't have time for the broker to be phoning us, once every second day to ask us some more questions or ask us to go for tests. So the access to automated underwriting and insurance has resulted in a compression of that into a single call, where either online you can issue your own policy, or you can speak to a call center consultant at your own time, whenever you want to. You don't have to make appointments. You don't have to take calls inside of your business hours when you're busy with other tasks. So access has been the greatest thing, without a doubt. And we're accessing more people. It's easier for them to access. They can access when they want to, and without hassle, and get the same type of service without the hassle and without the extended time pressure.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's look at the future trends. What does the future look like when it comes to automation in this industry?
So the future's very optimistic. So if I step back now from the traditional insurers and move to the automation side, which I love, there's a trend, and it's a trend that I'm very interested in, very involved in, and that is automating or providing data to automated systems so that we don't have to ask clients as many questions on the telephone. So in the automation space, what we do is we ask the 10 questions, as I mentioned earlier, and then we have reflexive questions based on that. And what we've found is when you've got an applicant on the telephone and you ask them a medical question, so and you say, well, have you ever had any sort of, let's say, a mole removed? Have you had any cancerous moles or anything that needed to be excised? And we ask a person that, and we ask them when it occurred. And it's very difficult for a person to remember that because, you can't remember, was it now 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years ago? And each of those years has a very specific and it's very relevant to the outcome of the underwriting. So what we've started doing is using third-party data. So when you go to the doctor or to the hospital, you then submit a claim to your medical aid. You are registered on the hospital, the doctor's system. All of those create digital footprints and creates a digital medical history for you. And we've started tapping into that. So we start then looking at what we call ICD-10s, which are diagnosis codes, procedure codes, and we start drawing those from these databases and providing them to the automation system for the automation system to be able to make decisions without asking the customer for any specific answers. So to give you an example of that, customers on the phone and we say to them, can we access your medical history via a bunch of digital channels that we have? The customer says yes. That then an API fires off these requests, all the medical databases. That brings back a bunch of medical history, which is then automatically applied to the automated system. And it cuts down the amounts of questions that need to be asked of the client and provides a more accurate picture of what the person's health is without them having to physically go back and remember. So an example with that would be an HIV result or cholesterol reading or some laboratory results from your Lancet or your Ampath or PathCare labs that come back, which are structured responses, which the automation system can then automatically apply rules to and automatically make decisions for the customer. So really, really new age stuff where with a click of a button, we go and get your medical history. We don't ask you any questions and we provide you with a premium. So that's the new trend that we are seeing now. So we're getting more towards a one-click insurance application process.
That sounds really, really exciting. But my biggest concern is when it comes to, so that seems like a model that will work very well within the private sector,
Yes.
where the systems are. But when it comes to the government, people, that access public facilities, how is that going to work?
So that's always going to be problematic. So in South Africa, unfortunately, the government's medical facilities still mostly work on paper files. So the recent fire at Johannesburg General resulted in years and years of files being destroyed. So that's history that's gone forever. So these medical procedures that people who attend government hospitals receive, that's just not recorded at this stage. Maybe in the future with NHI, we'll see a digitized system. But for now, unfortunately, the lower income earners are just not seeing this type of benefit. It will happen in the future, but that's maybe 20 years in the future once the government hospitals are digitized.
But how sad is that, hey? because the people that need it the most as well are the people that are accessing the public facilities.
So,
Yeah.
to remember that they're not excluded. It's just they're excluded from the hyper digitized process, but they can still call the call center and take out a policy and answer the questions. So that's not going to go away for any time soon. It's just around automating what we can,
Yeah.
and waiting for digital solutions to come along, which allow us to automate a little more, and access more people, and it'll happen. It definitely will happen.
Beautiful, beautiful. As we bring this conversation to an end, which has actually been very informative for me, I actually have learned a lot about the automation in the insurance industry. One of the solutions that we offer, as a business is robotic process automation.
Yes.
So we distribute those solutions, and the insurance industry is one of our clients that we really focus on. So it's just been very, very exciting for me just to get the intricacies of how the industry operates.
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk at the moment around robotic process automation, specifically in the
Yes.
claims environment. So there's a lot of almost checklist items that the claims teams need to run through, and claims processing in insurance is still very much a manual human intervention. So robotic process automation, so comparing dates, comparing ID numbers, checking that certain documents are received, checking that the information on the documents is legible and correct. That's definitely something that we're looking at. I'm busy looking at a project at the moment to automate exactly that for an insurer, to get that through.
Beautiful, beautiful. So do you have any, closing remarks, parting shots for the audience when it comes to automation and, underwriting and just the insurance industry in general?
So I think my parting shot would be to anyone out there that's in the traditional space, is to consider automation. It doesn't have to be 100% in. There are little bits and pieces that can be added that make people's lives easier. So we try and find a way to remove the paper from the desk and move to something where we don't have to do any writing, where we don't have to manually fill out application forms, which makes everyone's life easier. And we start the journey. We started with a step, and we see how that works, and we take the next step, and so we go. It doesn't have to be all in. It can be bit by bit, and over time, you'll eventually find yourself with a decent automated solution, saving yourself a bit of time and money, and getting a lot more clients through the books and onto the books.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that advice. Just start, one step at a time, in bits and pieces. And eventually you will find that you've made progress in terms of automating and digitizing processes.
100%.
Yeah.
I think there's a hesitancy to do it because the project perhaps seems too large. Sometimes it's not as large as it seems, and if you understand the component pieces, it makes it a little easier. If you just a little bit here, a little bit there, and soon enough you've got something that's flying.
So how would I'm actually thinking about probably the small guys that are still quite on manual, maybe the insurance brokers and all that. Where do they start? Do they just choose their IT team to start doing these digitization processes? What would be your advice in there?
So most insurers carry a reassurer as a backup. And that would be the people to engage with. So for them to go to their reinsurer and say, what are your automation options and how do we take this forward? And if that reassurer doesn't have an option for that, then it's perhaps time to look around and see what automation is available through the various reassurers in the industry.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And on that note, we will bring our conversation to an end. Thank you so much, Kate, for making time to come and share your valuable insights about the insurance industry and automation.
Thank you, Sarah. It was great speaking to you. And I hope I've added some value to some people who will be watching this.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure people are going to find a lot of value because, like you're saying, I think the insurance industry is still quite conservative, I would call it, when it comes to automation and digitization. Other industries are miles and miles ahead, but the insurance industry seems to be lagging behind. So this definitely will be valuable.
If I can add one last thing, if we remember the days when our banking, we had to go to the branch, and the branch was open from 8 until 3:30. And if you wanted to do something, you had to wait for a banking day. If you wanted to do a withdrawal, you had an ATM, or you could go over the counter. We still used checks. That changed almost overnight. Suddenly we had internet banking. Now we have mobile app banking, and that changed, and it's changed all our lives for the better. And us old people barely remember that anymore. The youngsters have no idea that even existed. And insurance can do that too. It's not really that different. We make it available, and we encourage utilization, and eventually it'll all migrate to something great, digital, and of more value to all of us.
True. Well said. Well said. And that's actually a very good example that you've given with the financial industry, the banks. I mean, we hardly get to go to the bank anyway. And, we get our services literally on demand 24/7 because, automation has really just brought better customer experience in that space.
It has.
Yeah. All right, then. You have a great day ahead, and it's been just fantastic conversing with you throughout this podcast recording. Have a great day, and ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Sarah. Great to speak to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.